Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good morning, good morning. Like I promised you a little earlier, we would be having an interview this morning. I expected to see Phil Jeffers with me this morning to help me introduce my guest for today, but he ain't come, so that's all right. I'll fly on my own today. We have Ms. Juanita Headley. She's the founder and CEO of Change in Cases. She is a licensed New York attorney. So behave yourselves this morning, Sadhu. We have a lawyer in the house this morning. But we are talking about child abuse prevention. And one of the things I'm picking up is that with this COVID-19 pandemic, children are even more at risk than they were ever before. And it is rather interesting. Family members are known statistically to be one of the biggest abusers, close relatives, people who they know. And now that they're home with everyone, it makes good sense that they are more exposed. We have to be vigilant and we have to be extra careful. So this morning, this program is coming to you with the kind compliments of the Child Development Units in our Ministry of National Mobilization, funded by UNICEF and USAID. Ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you Miss Juanita M. Headley. She'll tell us a little bit about herself and the program that we are embarking on this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Most certainly. I'm originally from London, England. My parents are Jamaican. I grew up in the UK, moved to Switzerland when I was 17, trained to be a chef, worked at the United Nations. And after that, I went back to the United Kingdom, where I eventually pursued a degree in law. And I'm now a licensed New York attorney for around 6.5 years. But for 9 years, I have been doing human trafficking prevention work around the world and child abuse prevention work. I have done volunteering in orphanages, juvenile detention centers. I'm also the CEO and founder of Change in Cases, which is an international organization that aims to eradicate homelessness and exploitation. In addition to that, I am also the author of a book called Can You Keep a Secret, which deals with the issue of human trafficking and child abuse prevention.
Now, I see here that you're an international speaker. You've been doing this quite a lot lately.
Absolutely. Particularly with the lockdown, we have to realize that exploitation, abuse, domestic violence is all on the increase. It's a very important topic. And what sometimes saddens me is a lot of the focus is taken away from this, and it's all about the disease. In fact, for me, I'm a born-again Christian, so I'm very much about Philippians 4 and focusing on the positive. Irrespective of my beliefs on focusing on the positive, knowledge is power. As the Bible says, people perish for lack of knowledge. And so I've taken it upon myself to travel the world and to educate people on a topic that is still an issue, even though we're maybe isolated, even though we may be staying at home. Because what we have to realize is that when it comes to abuse, exploitation, domestic violence, when you are isolating at home, that increases the risk of you experiencing that because, of course, tensions increase. And so we have to appreciate that with all of these things, the lockdown actually makes it a lot worse. And therefore, it needs to be a topic of conversation that is brought right to the forefront. It's not about saying let's not talk about the disease, but it's about knowing that we've got to talk about both things hand in hand.
This is heavy stuff. Even outside of the pandemic, it was a difficult thing to deal with. Now it is even more glaring. It compounds the issue in a big way. Today's theme is survivor's testimony. This is about you. Wow. Heavy stuff. I hope I don't get too emotional. As you indicated that you are a born-again Christian, I am also a born-again Christian. And I guess faith is what will keep us stronger. A survivor's testimony. You survived abuse.
Unfortunately, from the ages of 4 to 10 by my mother's first husband.
So that's how old you were when the abuse started?
And it began with tickling. And as a result of what I've been through, I have a huge issue of tickling. I'm not comfortable. In fact, I know of a young girl, she's probably around 16, But when I spent some time with her, she was about 12, and she said that she doesn't like to be tickled because she feels violated. That's a very strong word for a 12-year-old. And I asked her if she'd been abused, and she said no, but let's be realistic. When a person has been abused, most often they will deny it. When I was asked a few times if I'd been abused in my childhood, I denied it. And there are many reasons why we do that. For me, it began with tickling. And I recall very well when I was in Spain, I was in a house with my mother, my stepfather, and he had started tickling me. And the terms that I used as a 4-year-old was that his hands had slipped. Now, my mother is a teacher, and she had always told me nobody should touch your private parts. She used the correct terminology. It wasn't cookie, pumpkin, butterfly. It was private parts. She used the correct terminology. We had those conversations. But unfortunately, those conversations didn't stop me from being abused because I was groomed. The issue is when I disclosed to my mother that I was being abused, I said my stepfather tickled me, his hands had slipped. When I communicated that to her, by her own admission, she told my stepfather off. He ran away. He's an alcoholic. He ran away and did return back and continue the abuse many years later. However, when I told her that, she reminded me, because that's a long time ago, she reminded me that she told me off. And she said, don't let it happen again. So when she told me that as a 4-year-old, when it happened again, I didn't tell her because she had put the burden on me. Oh. When I was a little older, I told my cousins who told their mother. They told their mom, who told my grandmother, who told my mom. And I remember this very vividly. I maybe was 7 or 8, sitting on the floor watching an advert about stay safe when you cross the road. And my mom said, your cousin said you're being abused by your stepfather. We're going to have a family discussion. At that time, he was at the off license, the alcohol shop down the road, alcoholic. He was in his usual spot. And she told me that. And I remember sitting on the floor. I can't tell you what emotions I was experiencing, but I was sitting on the floor waiting for this conversation. It never happened. And the abuse continued. And so when my family sometimes get upset with me when I talk about this, or upset with me when I don't sort of feel close to them or have feelings of love towards them, I have to ask myself, what's the reason? And when I look back and think that they knew but didn't do anything, that is probably why.
When did it stop?
When I was 10, however, having had therapy, it technically didn't stop. My therapists say that it paused. Because in fact, I recall I may have been 10 or 11, and we were in Florida at a hotel where the swimming pool is in the middle, the rooms are facing the swimming pool. And I ran upstairs for whatever reason, don't remember the reason. And my stepfather was in the shower. He came out of the shower, and we had a floor-to-ceiling window. And so I'm standing at the window peeping through, and my stepfather stood in front of the mirror completely nude in front of the mirror. So I'm seeing him, the reflection, so I'm seeing his full frontal, because the way that the mirror is positioned, I could see his full body, and he was of course naked. And I am convinced that he knew I was there. I don't know if we made eye contact. I can't answer that question, but I'm convinced he knew that I was there. He just stood in front of the mirror, just looking at himself. And I went downstairs and told my mom, and she said, he probably didn't see you. That is the issue, defending the perpetrator. And that happens a lot. You misunderstood. He didn't mean it that way. She didn't mean it that way. Then when I was 15, my stepfather made a video with my mother. On that occasion, I came home from school, normally get undressed in front of the television. But on this day, now I wasn't a Christian, I was a churchgoer. On this day, I did not get undressed in front of the TV. Now understand, because of being abused, I'm not comfortable being nude, so I would never have been naked or anything. But school clothes to casual clothing. On this occasion, must have been the Holy Spirit, I got dressed in my bedroom. And that afternoon, my mum and stepdad said, we saw you, you're watching TV instead of doing your homework. My mum left the house, and my stepfather said, would you like to see the video? I said, yes. He said, on the TV, back in the day, the big box on the TV, or on the computer, the handheld camera. So I said, I'd rather see it on the handheld camera. He cues up the video. I'm leaning over his shoulder, ready to watch myself watching the TV. But it was a pornographic video of him and my mother. And so I am convinced now, looking back, that he made that video with her with the intention of grooming me to engage in those activities, because it paused when I was 10. And then prior to that, my stepfather maybe when I was 12 or 13, he lifted up his trousers, we call trousers, and asked me to put my hands down there. And even though I'd been abused and went to an all-girls school and we talked about sex, I was quite naive. But I said no, and I walked away. A lot of victims and survivors don't have the strength and courage to say no. And I want to point out that from 4 to 10, it started with tickling and it progressed to sexual abuse during my sleep, which is why as an adult I have sleep issues. I use earplugs, I use eye blind, but any noise, the fan, the air condition, the dogs, the cocks crowing, any noise keeps me awake. I've got to sleep in a completely dark room that is completely silent. And my therapist said that's because by you having a silent and dark room, then you're on alert. Now, I sleep in different homes with different friends, male, female. They give me a spare room. I might have a couch. I'm comfortable sleeping, but I have to have those conditions. That is necessary. Without it, I'll be awake all night. And I've also observed when I sleep, I face away from the door. I cannot face the door. I don't understand why that is. And I was recently in Beckway, and there was a window on one side, the door on the other, and I wasn't sure which way to face. But I think the facing away from the door is because he would come in through the door at night to abuse me.
I'm looking at you, and you seem quite composed. This has to be difficult to talk about. Is it difficult at this stage? How difficult it was to talk about it and talk about what you were going through then and even now?
As a child, it was very hard to talk about it because I was ashamed and embarrassed. I did not feel responsible. I knew it wasn't my fault. I was groomed. Grooming is preparation. When somebody prepares you, when you prepare your child for school, when you prepare yourself for work, or you prepare an individual for the purpose of sexual exploitation. My stepfather abused me in my sleep. In the daytime, he was my best friend. It was like two different people. And so as a result of that, I was hiding my feelings, because when somebody is trying to rape you every night, but you fight back, you pretend you're tossing and turning. When someone tries to rape you for 6 years of your life, but then you're best friends in the morning, that doesn't make sense. Maybe it's Stockholm Syndrome or trauma bonding. For the layman, that doesn't make sense. He never threatened me. There was no words. I was sleeping. So, of course, there was no interaction. But from the age of 4, I had been hiding my feelings because nobody knew. He was my best friend. And so for me, talking about it when I was younger, I was embarrassed and ashamed. And as a 4-year-old, 5-year-old, etc., growing up until the age of 10, it was hard for me to speak about because it's not like I was brought up using the correct terms. Yes, private parts. But it's not even like I could articulate what was happening to me because we don't have those types of conversations with small children. We don't talk about sex in detail with small children. If we were more comfortable discussing this, then the child will have the confidence to talk about what is going on. However, since doing this ministry for 6 years, I talk about it very freely. What I can say for me, and you got to hear this with caution, I'm a robot. And I say that because my emotions are happiness or anger, 2 emotions. There's not much in between. And a lot of victim survivors have so much anger. Angry at the world. I'm always angry. If I'm not happy, I'm angry. In my WhatsApps, there's anger. Everything is anger, 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 or happiness. It's those 2 emotions. And so for me, I am very detached. When I talk about the story, I talk about it matter of fact. But for me, as a Christian, and because of the grooming, I do not paint my stepfather in a positive light. He's deceased. In the eyes of the Lord, LAW, justice was never served. In the eyes of the Lord, it will be. He died a number of years ago. For me personally, being bitter and angry will not change anything. He taught me how to ride a bike. He taught me to cook, my passion for food. He taught me those things. I believe what the enemy intends for evil, God intends for good. And so for me, of course, there's still a lot of work to be done where therapy and counseling is concerned, but I would rather focus on the positive contributions he made in my life than the fact that he subjected me to sexual assault and attempted rape for 6 years. And so for me, even as I share this now, I have not flashbacks, but memories of what happened. But I just detach myself from it. It's like it's another person. But I would say that, of course, it has affected me. It still affects me with the anger. That's a big one. The insomnia. low self-esteem, insecurity. And I meet many survivors who similarly struggle with the same things. Some of these survivors, we're talking about 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, they still suffer with the effects of it. I am uncomfortable getting undressed. If we are both females, I will be getting undressed in a secluded room by myself. I'm very uncomfortable. But the blessing is, as a Christian, what happened to me has kept me celibate. I am a celibate Christian because of what has happened. Some survivors and victims become promiscuous. Some become prostitutes, some transgender, some homosexual. I say some because it's a touchy subject, but I have met victims and survivors who, because of their experiences, it shapes them in different ways. So the word is some. Not every abused person becomes an abuser or becomes promiscuous. At the end of the day, it depends on your life and the journey that it takes. But for me, by the grace of God, I'm using my story to educate, empower, and inspire people that your past does not have to dictate the future. For me, if I can save another child from going through what I went through so that they can be healthy and whole, that means my job has been accomplished. I'm convinced if that had never happened to me, I wouldn't be here today. I believe I'd be married already. I would have my orphanage in the Philippines and my adopted Filipino street children. The reason I do what I do completely unpaid is because of what has happened to me. I have decided to make this my life's ministry, my life's mission. And I believe forgiveness is duly important. Have I forgiven my stepfather? I don't have an answer to that. I was groomed. Groomed means brainwashing and conditioning, these types of things. And as I said, I focus on the positives. But that unforgiveness probably rests a lot with my mother, who did not protect me, and my family. My mother did not know what was going on. She was in the house. She had no idea. Because perpetrators of abuse are often charismatic, smart, they know what they're doing, and they're able to get away with it right in front of your face. One of my mother's friends, let's call her Susan, for example, would call my mum, and she talks more than me. I talk a lot, she talks more than me. So my stepfather knew that my mother would be occupied for at least an hour. He'd come upstairs, abuse me, go next door to the bathroom, flush the toilet, and come downstairs. So she just thought he was on the computer when computers were around, or he's in the toilet. That was what he did. That was his MO, and she had no idea. But when she eventually found out, when it had paused at 10, paused but not stopped, she told me, put things in front of your bedroom. But as I shared, he was nude in front of the mirror. He asked me to put my hands under his trousers, and I was exposed to the pornographic video.
I don't want to use the word suffer. I think you have gone through enough. But let's focus on your faith. You mentioned therapy, and you mentioned your faith in God. Is this what is keeping you buoyant today? Is this what is keeping you afloat? Would you recommend this as a means to get through the residual effects? Because there have to be some long-term effects. And you have walked through quite a few of them with us, the self-esteem issues and the quirks, as for want of a better word, not being able to sleep properly. These are all effects. What keeps you buoyant beyond your faith?
For me, I would say my faith, most definitely. Unfortunately, what I will say is that I have had counseling, but in my personal opinion, it has been ineffective. I believe that any person who has been a victim or survivor abused in their young age, that individual, often they develop an ACE. An ACE is an adverse childhood experience. When a person has an ACE, an adverse childhood experience, it often creates spaces in the brain. However, science has proven with therapy, counseling, prayer, and healing, the brain is completely restored. However, there are so many victims and survivors walking amongst us who still have those spaces in the brain and still have those dysfunctions. I believe therapy and counseling has their purpose. The issue I had in the UK is when I would go for therapy sessions on and off, they would give me advice, like in my university, that I should sleep around to become empowered, which I did not follow as a born-again Christian. Other times I would go for therapy, they would speak to me and they would say to me, how is your day? And because I'm an only child, by the way, so I talk a lot. But then at the same time, I know some survivors who also talk a lot too. And my theory is those of us survivors who talk is to disguise what else is going on underneath. And so for me, if you ask me, how is your day? Somebody who talks a lot, who's an only child, who has few friends because of the anger issues and pushing people away, I will spend the whole 50-minute therapy session talking about my day. And so for the little duration I had therapy in the UK, I never touched on the topic of abuse, but I will share some good news. I went to Trinidad. I've been going there for the last 6 years, usually around this time of year, January and February before Carnival, to talk on the topic of human trafficking. And when I went there, I was connected to 2 therapists, both Christian. One of them prays before the session, the other one does not pray, but they both serve their purposes in different ways. When I went to the assessment of both therapists in the same week, they asked me about the abuse. In all my young years, my age is a big secret, right? In all my young years, I have never directly been asked about the abuse in a therapy session. And I believe it had an impact and it had an effect, because the very same week of going to those 2 sessions, I had a dream about my stepfather. Now, I've never dreamt about him before, and this dream was a very inappropriate dream where I was being abused, assaulted, raped. I was over the age of consent. It was in a vehicle in the trees. And I think the reason that may have come to mind is because myself and one of my friends, my stepfather once took us when we were about 13, 14, to a park, a massive park with lots of trees. And he made us go in the park. Now, I don't know if that was to abuse my friend. I can't ask him that. I don't know. I don't have the answers, and I don't know what was his intention. But he took us there for no apparent reason. And we hear about cases where children are abused in the park or in the bushes. So I don't understand that. But I had a dream that was very similar. The only difference was that I was being abused, raped, assaulted in a vehicle. And that dream really bothered me because I was over the age of consent. That's the only time I've had the dream in my entire life. But I believe because we were talking on the topic, it was bringing things to the surface. Unfortunately, my therapist at the time did not do Zoom sessions. Now we're in a lockdown. Everybody's on Zoom, so that means it's very difficult. But whenever I've gone to Trinidad and Tobago, I make it a point to see them because they have helped. Therapy and counseling definitely serves a purpose to deal with the issues. At the moment, I do have a therapist. I talk to her once a week unless our schedules clash. However, with my current therapist, it's more about how's your day. But what I will say is she's helping me how to deal with things better. One of my therapists discussed triggers. Triggers is something many of us don't understand. So, for example, when I feel a person is disrespecting me or a person is asking me something that makes me uncomfortable, that is a trigger because my stepfather disrespected me. He overstepped my boundaries. One of my biggest triggers is my age. My age is not a secret. I could say it, but I'd rather not. It's not necessarily relevant. But when people say to me, for example, oh, you look so young, in that kind of tone of voice and way, I find it very patronizing and rude, and it triggers me, and I respond with anger. When someone says, wow, you look very youthful, it's a different response. And my therapist, when I talk to her, she gets me to understand, you felt disrespected by that. This is why you responded. Knowing your triggers helps you to be able to respond better because not everybody has the patience to be around you, to support you on your journey of healing. Because when you're full of anger and you're pushing people away, they don't have time for that. It's a sad reality, but unfortunately, that is often how it is.
You, perhaps more than others, may be able to find and spot and identify a lot of issues surrounding sexual abuse, the signs, perpetrators, abusers, those who may be abused. What are some of those signs?
If a person has been a victim or survivor of abuse, some of the signs and identifiers, when it's a small child, regressive behavior, sucking the thumb, wetting the bed. With an older child, obesity, insomnia, low self-esteem, insecurity, maybe self-harming, cutting of the wrists, an individual who overbaths, excessively baths or doesn't bath at all, promiscuous behavior, HIV, AIDS, STDs, unwanted pregnancy, a young child, for example, who engages with themselves sexually, that's masturbation, because I hear stories about children having sex with teddy bear or toy, and often the parents will beat it out of them without wondering where the child is learning that from. What about a person who, for example, is overdressing or underdressing? The overdressing is very covered up. They dress sometimes very masculine or like a boy. And I know of a girl who was sexually abused by her brother, father, grandfather, every man in her household. Her classmates shared with me when she wasn't in school during my presentation. I said, the reason I'm here is because she invited me. And they said she's not here today. And they told me that she wears long sweaters, that she has cuts on her wrist. And the way they described her was that her dress was very masculine. Because think about it, she's a pretty girl. When I met her, I said, you're very pretty. When you are abused sexually by the men in your household, that can make you very uncomfortable with your own sexuality, your own body. And so as a result of that, you cover up. Then there are other women and girls who've been abused who maybe wear very less clothing. There are various signs and identifiers. The list is very extensive, and that's just a few of them. They're available on the internet. It's useful to go through one by one. Because truth be told, when you go through that list, anger issues, few friends, low self-esteem, insomnia, obesity, when you go through that list, you will easily be able to identify people in your world who have been abused or are being abused. But I've got to be clear with the obesity. Not every obese person has been abused. When you're abused, you lose control, so you eat to control. And that is an important point. I'm not obese. I'm very small. I'm vegan. I'm very small. I have never been obese. I'm not promiscuous. So what you have to realize is the signs and identifiers, the list is extensive. Not everyone applies. Anger issue is a big one. That's what I got to point out. A lot of us have anger issues. The insomnia. When I say that I have insomnia, people tell me to drink chamomile tea, Horlicks, Milo, or take sleeping pills. But when they say that to me, I find it patronizing and it triggers me again, and I get angry because it's like, why are you telling me that? It is psychological. I was abused in my sleep. I'm hypersensitive to noise. Therefore, any noise will disturb me. Recently, I was staying in someone's home and they said to me, you could use the fan at night, it's quiet. I need complete silence. And I've met other survivors who have sexual abuse, who've been sexually abused, who have sleeping issues. One of them struggles to sleep because she's afraid of her child being abused. With the others, they were abused in their sleep. But there are many reasons, flashbacks, nightmares. So we have to scratch beneath the surface. The Bible talks about tree, branches, and fruit. I feel we need to get to the root cause. When you can get to the root cause, you can understand a person's behavior. Because if you look at the list, you could identify Miss Headley. You look at the list, you could identify somebody in your world. The list is extensive. Take a look so you can identify victims and survivors and get them the help and the healing they need to be able to live productive, whole, and healthy lives.
You mentioned grooming quite a lot. Quite a lot. What are some of the signs of that? How could we spot that?
With grooming, one way to look at it is when a person does nice things to you for the purpose of exploiting sexually. The way that I was groomed, my stepfather gave me special privileges. He let me stay up late, gave me candy. My mother was very strict. She used corporal punishment. So my stepfather was the complete opposite. He taught me to cook, to ride a bike. He became my best friend. I know of an individual. He used to play video games with a child. He would just sit and play video games. That was a form of grooming. I hear about children being given money, cell phone. What about when we have the taxi drivers or the maxi driver, the bus driver, the conductor, who allows you to get on the bus for free? Grooming is very subtle. Any person, male or female, young or old, can be groomed. And when I talk about sexual abuse, boys are also victims too. And I have stories and stories and stories of men who have confided in me, often the only person they've told, that they were sexually abused. And how does that person get away with it? Number one, we don't speak about it. I also want to point out too, another way of grooming is by being over-familiar. One boy in the Caribbean who was a victim of attempted sodomy by a family member when he was under the age of 7, when he was a few years older, he would often spend time at the neighbor's house. She was a female. That neighbor, when he was in public with her, would hug him and kiss him and say, "This is my boyfriend." These kinds of comments and remarks are inappropriate. She's doing it publicly, but privately she would be completely nude and should get him to engage sexually with her. When I asked him, because we're close. Now, this is an inappropriate question, but because we're close, when I asked him, why didn't you say anything? Which is the wrong question, but I could do that because of our relationship. He said, I thought she was my girlfriend. And I said to him, I understand that because when I was younger, I had a crush on my teacher, but the age gap is a little bit big. Didn't you think about that? You've got to realize when a person is a child, they think as a child. It says it right in the Bible. He is thinking as a child. I know of another boy, he was a victim of sexual abuse by a family member who was older, a female. When he was victimized, the mother came in and found the two. He got beaten. What you have to understand when it comes to boys, the way that they are often groomed is through pornography, through marijuana, through showing them videos and imageries, by having this secret amongst them. That is often how boys are groomed. With girls, the grooming might be, I love you, you're my girlfriend, because women are more emotional. If we think about the Garden of Eden, back then we had a lady who was tempted into sin by what she heard. We had a man who sees a naked woman tempted into sin. Often when men would groom girls, it's through words, through messages, through compliments, over time, and often it's a slower process. With boys' pornography, you've got your little secret. Girls and boys are both vulnerable, and what we have to realize, grooming is a gradual process. Even there are times I meet people who try to groom me. When I was in school, I won't say which school, I was over the age of consent, one of my teachers would put his hand on my shoulder. I was uncomfortable. I have the gift of discernment. For other people, it's a gut instinct. I felt something. Nothing ever happened, but I was afraid, and I knew if he ever does anything to me, I would sit there and not respond. My other teacher, again, I will not specify the school, same school, he would make inappropriate comments to me publicly. And I remember one day I went to his office and I said, I'm not coming inside, and we made a joke about it. But with him, it was public. What often happens, these perpetrators of abuse, it's very secret. It's done behind closed doors. It becomes your little secret. They may not say those words, but the way things is done, it's very much cloak and dagger. And even as an adult, how could an adult be groomed? For me, I can tell you there are men who try to groom me, some of whom are married, some who are in a relationship. How do they try to groom me? By being nice to me, by asking me what's going on, tell me your problems. I'm serious. Just like that, just by trying to worm their way into my life to find my vulnerability. Other ways, it's more overt. I had a boy message me a week ago. We met 3 months ago at a presentation. I don't recall who he is because he didn't come up to me in the presentation. But what I will say is I gave my message approximately 3 months ago. However, he messages me out of the blue and tells me that he's addicted to masturbation. Now, when he told me that out of the blue, straight away, antenna on alert, is he trying to groom me? Another guy a couple of years ago in Trinidad, we're at his church, Seventh-day Adventist church. He came up to me right at the front of the church and he was telling me play by play about how he was sexually abused by his girlfriend and telling me the details in a church. I stood there so uncomfortable and I just took it all in, but I was thinking, I think he's trying to groom me. And we have to be astute and alert to understand, because it's not that he maybe wants to abuse or rape me, but maybe groom me into a relationship. I'm not going to talk about my relationship status. It's not necessary. But the point is, there are people who see you. They have an interest in you. And grooming doesn't have to be bad. Think about it. If you like a guy or a girl, you're both single, you would groom them into that. What about a friend? For me, I love to cook. So if I love you platonically, male or female, I would cook for you because I want to groom you into liking my food and buying my stuff. Grooming doesn't have to be bad, but grooming is often misused. The original intention of grooming is to prepare, but it's being misused, preparing for taking advantage and exploiting somebody sexually.
Our laws does not permit someone to know of abuse and cover it up. Someone who knows of abuse can be charged if they don't report it. But we still have that difficulty in reporting. We still have children who are defending the abuser. How do we get past these issues?
I think what's really important is those who are listening in who want to make a difference, they need to understand Stockholm Syndrome and trauma bonding. Two very different and very similar things. You've got to understand that. What happens when you have been groomed and conditioned or brainwashed, it is very, very difficult for you to speak out against that person. No individual wants to be abused or violated. Of course not. Because somebody recently said to me, well, if I was in a relationship and my girlfriend was abusive, I wouldn't stay. And I said, your comment is very ignorant. And I said, you got to be careful what you say because you can offend people. No person wants to be abused. I've heard there is this statement or mindset over here in SVG that a woman thinks the guy doesn't love her if he doesn't beat her. I can tell you, having been abused sexually as a child and being a victim of domestic violence by a boyfriend, I can say to you that I would not want anybody to beat me up, strangle me, or try to kill me. Of course not. But it is very, very hard to leave. Fear is false evidence appearing real. In my case, I didn't speak out against my stepfather because I was embarrassed and ashamed and afraid. He never told me not to say anything. We need to understand that it is very difficult for a child to speak up. And other times it is because they feel responsible. What we need to have a generation of parents, caregivers, social workers, staff members in schools be on the alert to identify. We need individuals to have patience. Patience requires you to sit there and wait, to give them the free space and the platform to speak. It is very, very difficult for us to share. Why do we not speak out against the person? Maybe because we love them, not romantically, we love them. That is our stepfather, our mother, our father, because mothers do it too. There's a lot of responsibility we take on as a child, not because we may have been told, well, if you speak out against what's going on, mommy and daddy will go to jail or you will go to jail, but we take on a lot of responsibility and burden. What it is, we need to have a safe space and an outlet to be able to disclose what we're going through, but often that doesn't exist. We are not believed. That is first and foremost. Or parents will say to you, mother or father, you misunderstood. That's not what he or she meant. Let's just forget about it. I even heard quite recently of a girl, I don't recall which country she was. It was a Zoom meeting, and this girl, she was actually a victim, I wouldn't say directly of sexual touching, but of grooming which would have led on to abuse by a pastor. And the mother went and she spoke to the head pastor and nothing was done about it. That is one of the biggest things. The fear that we have, I'll speak out, I'll be disbelieved, or I'll speak out, I'll get into trouble, or I'll be beaten. I've heard so many times of children who have disclosed and been beaten. That is a problem. And think about it, when we have girls who are pregnant at a young age, we, not me, but we people may sit and judge and say she's promiscuous when maybe that child is a product of rape or incest. And that is the thing, it requires us to be on the alert, number one, to know what to look for, to know how to identify. Beyond that, we need to have patience. If you say to a child, have you been abused? They will most likely deny it. Now, when I want information from a person, I don't ask them, did you do this? Did you not? I ask them why. So even recently I was talking to somebody and I said, why did you eat my something? And they said, I didn't. The point is, when you start your question with why, it sounds like you know. So recently I had a number of guys communicate with me after some of my presentations, and one of them asked me certain questions. And I said to him, how old were you when you were abused? He said, abused, question mark? And I asked him the question again and he disclosed an age. I didn't know he had been abused, but I threw it out there because of the things we were talking about. Another guy started to talk to me again. I threw it out there. He said he's not been abused. However, when we was talking, he spoke to me about how he's addicted to pornography and masturbation. He told me how he's purchased a girl for sex and he groomed her because he knew she didn't have money. He knew she was vulnerable. He would message her on social media and he saw her situation and he persuaded her after a number of weeks and she gave herself up for money. I did not agree with that. I didn't want to judge and condemn him or condone him, so I just said very little. But I did say to him, do you realize that you've actually taken advantage of her, which he acknowledged? But I was bothered by that. And then he went on to say that he actually does watch pornography and the girls are usually 14 and 15 years of age. So I asked him, does he want to have sex with children? And he got upset, doesn't talk to me anymore. I wasn't trying to put words in his mouth. I was trying to understand. When I called it child pornography, he had issue with that. But it is child porn because they're under the age of consent. Unless they were Filipinos, where the age of sexual consent is 12, they would most likely have been under that age. Now, truth be told, when he told me that he watches pornography, he's addicted, and he watches pornography with teens, according to him, I will tell you, I felt he was trying to groom me. He asked me if I watch porn, if I masturbate. I said, no, I do not masturbate. I'm a practicing Christian. That is not my interest. Not every abused person is addicted to sex or anything like that. I said, no, I do not. I made that clear. But in all my life, no one has ever asked me that. It is an inappropriate question because some Christians struggle with that too. Some Christians watch pornography, whether it's child, teen, or adult pornography. But I felt like he was grooming me because why are we having this conversation? Anybody who knows me knows that I speak against abuse and trafficking. So when you tell me you watch child or teen porn, what is the purpose of that? And that's what we need to realize. People will try to take advantage of any one of us. And when you've been abused at a young age, there is a target on your back. There is a sign on your forehead. People can identify. Maybe therapists and counselors who are really well trained and skilled to be able to spot the things in you. People like myself who have been doing this work so long, we can recognize. And unfortunately, perpetrators of sexual abuse can also recognize. Think about a woman who continues to be beaten up by every boyfriend. Every relationship she gets into is abusive. That is because there is a signage on her forehead. In fact, I know of a woman, she was actually in Germany, I believe, and she was being sexually exploited there. She ends up going into a safe house, which shuts down, returns to Canada where she's originally from. She's in a safe house for a little while. I think that one closed down too. And a lady said, "You've been through a lot, haven't you? I can tell that you've been trafficked." And she said, "I have a house with lots of girls." My antenna went on alert as soon as I read that sentence because I know so much about it. High alert immediately, and she was indeed trafficked once again. Knowledge is power, but I am not the only one with the knowledge. The perpetrators of abuse have the knowledge. They can almost sniff us out, which is why often we go through that pattern of exploitation. Some girls who've been abused end up in the sex industry, maybe not prostitution, but end up in a strip bar or strip club. In fact, 90% of prostitutes were sexually abused in their childhood. So when people call it sex work, I wholly disagree. One reason I disagree is you may call it sex work, but you would never allow your son or daughter to do that kind of work. And then number two, 90% of these women in the sex industry were sexually abused as a child. And even those who are porn stars, the vast majority, male and female, were sexually abused in their childhood.
As we get ready to wrap up, let's give some advice. Someone who has been abused or a survivor of abuse, what advice would you give to them right now?
The first thing is you need to find somebody that you can talk to, that you can confide in. Number one, you need to find a person you can confide in. It is not easy to speak verbally, I understand that, but we have cell phones. For me, if I was being abused and I had a cell phone, it would be a lot easier for me to communicate. How? Written message. I had some students ask me questions when I went to a primary school in Myro. One of the students was asking me so many different questions all about the same thing. What do you do if you're being abused? I said, tell the teacher. What if you're too shy to tell the teacher? Write a note and give it to the teacher. What if you're too shy to write a note and give it to the teacher? I said, write a note and put it on the teacher's desk. And then the child said to me, okay, thank you, Miss Headley. And that was it. However, the very same day, her teacher, not the same one, her teacher came up to me and said, literally, the presentation happened. Half an hour later, her teacher came up to me and said, she just told me there's a guy in Myro who's offering her 100 EC dollars to have sex. Knowledge is power. And actually, I will tell you the truth. When that child asked me those different questions, I made up the answers on the spot. I'm a lawyer, professional liar. That's what they call us, right?
Oh.
I make up things on the spot. So when she asked me that, I didn't have an answer, but I had to think of an answer. And when I said that to her, I was like, wait a minute, that's a great answer. And so that's the advice I have to give. Number one, talk to somebody. Number two, if you cannot verbalize it, because it is difficult, even just to say, I'm being abused, that is really hard. Think about a woman over the age of 18. My husband is beating me up. That is hard for her to say, even more for a child. Write it on a piece of paper. Send a text message. I feel for me, when I was growing up, I don't want to show my age, there were no phones. If there were, it would be easier for me to text it, to write it. And so that's what I'd encourage you to do. The next thing too, for somebody who hears a disclosure, the first thing you need to do, believe the child. even if it sounds like it's so not possible. I heard of a case of a girl who was sexually abused inside Home Depot when Home Depot was open with customers. And I remember this well because it was a Christian lawyer who said, how is that even possible? It was on Easter Sunday. I know all pastors are busy on Easter Sunday. I disagree with that because there are some pastors who have very small churches. I went to a church, there were only 5 people in the congregation. You cannot make such a blanket statement. No matter how unbelievable it is, I was being abused in Massey store, in the aisle. That might sound ridiculous. That doesn't mean to say it isn't true. Believe the child. Stay calm. Do not get involved in the story. What I mean by that, when you hear the story, do not say, well, Juanita, your stepfather, Anthony Brown, he is this and he is that. Don't do that. He was my best friend. Keep your opinions to yourself. Remain transparent. Do not promise what you cannot do. Unless you are a judge, do not promise what you cannot do. Do not investigate. Ask just very few questions to establish if abuse has happened, but do not dig into the story. It will destroy the child's testimony. Involve the police. That is important. Involve the police. Allow them to do their job. But on the back of that, this is important, and I have to mention it. I have a book called Can You Keep a Secret? I have a song called Can You Keep a Secret? Why do I have a book and a song with that particular tagline? Because when I was a child, I asked the question, can you keep a secret, to my grandfather and my aunt? And they both said it depends. A few weeks later, I asked again, it depends. Now for me, I know that is my story, but I wonder if a child had come up to me and I hadn't been abused and asked me, can you keep a secret? When I say it depends and they walk away, I would probably think, maybe he or she had something to tell me. Then they ask me again a month later and I say it depends and they walk away. I think that I would change my response. The point I'm trying to make is you need to respond affirmatively. If you're at work and there are certain rules, appreciate that. I get it. Follow the law of the land. But outside of your workplace where there are certain laws about secret keeping, for example, anytime somebody asks you, can you keep a secret? Is it confidential? Is it going to stay in the room? Respond yes. When you say yes, that child will disclose to you their secret. Once you've heard the secret, tell them, for example, I have to break your trust and phone the police. What your daddy is doing is not okay. But understand something clearly, because unfortunately, people over 18 misunderstand this time and time again. So I want to be very clear and specific. When somebody comes up to you and says, can you keep a secret? You say yes with your mouth. Say yes with your mouth, and it depends with your head. I discussed this in prison, in Belle Isle Kingstown prison, and at the end of my presentation, I can promise you 100% of the inmates understood you say yes. You're saying yes to hear the secret. What if it's a bomb? Well, when they've told you it's a bomb, you inform them, I have to phone the bomb squad. What if it's drugs? You inform them, I have to phone the drug squad. Hear this carefully, please. Anytime somebody comes up to you and says, can you keep a secret? Say yes. Once they have disclosed, tell them, I have to break your trust and phone the authorities. Do not phone the accused. I heard you've been sexually abusing Juanita. Phone the police. Can you keep a secret? Yes. Then I disclose what is going on, or that person discloses. The next thing you need to do is communicate your next steps. Do not run off and phone the police. Communicate first, then phone the police. If you run off without telling them first, they may recant the allegation and they will have trust issues. When you tell me, Juanita, what you're going through is not okay, when you communicate that to me, then I understand, and I might be angry at you now, but I can promise you in 10 or 20 years, I'll come back and thank you. So please, I'll say it again to be clear. You say yes to the question, can you keep a secret? They disclose. You communicate first what you're going to do. Go off and do it. Do not run behind their back. That causes trust issues. Tell them what you're going to do and go off and do it.
Not many survivors of abuse may be able to exude your kind of confidence. What can you say to them this morning?
I would say that no matter what you're going through, help is available. And I know that there is a great opportunity for you to be supported out of that situation. I say a great opportunity because when the Bible says when you don't ask, you don't get. You need to ask for help. Communicate, whether it's text, WhatsApp, whether it is a written note. It is hard to communicate with words, or even show somebody a video about abuse. Maybe that might trigger something in them. Get them to contact Miss Headley. Get them to reach out to me and say, Miss Headley's talking about this topic. Let her come to our church. Because, for example, if you hear me speak, I get invited to your church via Zoom or with social distancing. Your mother or father who hears me talk about this would hopefully identify that my daughter wets the bed. My son struggles with this, because the point is, often the reason parents and caregivers are not identifying you've been abused is they don't know the signs. So if you cannot even write it on as a note, talk to them and say, listen to this presentation, or even show them, look what Miss Headley is doing. Utilize me. I am willing to be utilized for the glory of God. Utilize me. When your parents learn about this, they will be able to identify that you're being abused. But you need to get the help. When you can reach out to somebody, text, written message, WhatsApp, however it is, when you can communicate, you can get that help and healing. Because sadly, even if you do wet the bed, or have insomnia, or cut your wrists, or promiscuous, or obese, unfortunately, they're not able to often identify it's because you've been abused.
Wonderful. I want to thank you for making the time and the effort. This indeed is a survivor's testimony, a personal one, a heavy one. And even me, I don't get emotional easily, but it's an amazing story. And I commend you for your tower of strength. I'm a man of faith, so I know where your strength is coming from. But it still will take a toll on you. Being able to go from home to home, institution to institution and recount it. I'm sure that there are pieces that come alive every time you tell the story. But it's a story that needs to be told as we are facing a pandemic. And truth be told, we are now even more vulnerable to issues of child abuse and domestic abuse. Our children are more and more exposed to issues on the internet, and we have to be very, very vigilant. I want to thank you for your testimony, and I want to thank you for the work that you do. As you say, you don't get paid handsomely as other lawyers may do for the work that you do, and well composed as you do it too. So thank you very much. Any parting words?
Most certainly, and thank you for the opportunity. As I said, I am an attorney. This is my life's mission, so I'm a volunteer. For me, this is an important topic, and people may have different opinions about the work that I do. For me, I do not want to charge. I don't feel it's appropriate. This is a life-changing message, and I'm here, and I want to educate, I want to empower, I want to safeguard children. And there's still so much more that I haven't even dug into today. So I want to encourage people, whether or not you're a victim or survivor, I can guarantee that somebody you know is a victim or a survivor. I can guarantee that this abuse, incest thing, it is a very prevalent issue, more than you realize. And especially, we got to understand, it's in boys and men too. There are men who you know, there are men who I know in your country in good positions who were violated and abused. It's an important topic, but if you would like to be able to hear my message, which is a free message going into more detail, I have an 8-hour training over 2 days. Please do reach out to me. I have a 1.5 presentation, all be done via Zoom. My number is 454-1693, 454-1693. My Facebook is Changing Cases. My website, changingcases.org. Changing Cases, Facebook. My website, changingcases.org. And my number again, 454-1693, 454-1693. Please do reach out to me. Like I said, it is an issue. And I can tell you, I would never name them, but I can tell you there are men I know here in good positions, you may even know them yourself, who were violated in their childhood. You would have no idea because they have moved on, they have been healed. But the fact is, it affects so many people. So again, 454-1693. My message is completely free of charge. So please reach out to me. This is my ministry. It's my mission. It doesn't feel like work. I may not be paid, but I love what I do. And I want to protect other people from going through what I went through. So please reach out to me. Tell me your story. Tell me your secret. 454-1693. Changing Cases. Changing CASES.org.
Thank you so much. And I hope the rest of your day go well.
Thank you for having me.
Ladies and gentlemen, this presentation this morning came to you from Miss Juanita Headley. She is an international speaker, a licensed New York attorney, and founder and CEO of Changing Cases, the Child Development Division within the Ministry of National Mobilization, in collaboration with UNICEF and funded by USAID. Thank you very much for listening.
Pound for pound, sound for sound, the best thing to happen to radio.